sports car zipped along Highway 290. At Elgin, 30 minutes east of Austin, Elise Beckett quickly signaled, turning onto the farm-to-market road that would take her home to River Bend, her family's vineyard. The late afternoon weather had been truly heinous over the last couple of weeks, with the temperatures hovering in the triple digits for 15 days straight. When you added in the humidity into the mix, it could really put a dent in your day. So Elise had done the only thing a homegrown Texas girl could do. She put the rag top down, dropped the pedal, and let the wind blow. Normally she drove to Austin Bergstrom Airport and flew to Big D, but late Friday afternoon she'd instead made the 5-hour drive from River Bend. She'd had a case of wine from the vineyard to schlep with her and would never have got it through airport security without a fight. It seemed no matter how hard Elise tried, she was always running late for something, and today was no exception. She planned to leave Dallas and head home much earlier in hopes of beating the Sunday traffic. Unfortunately, thanks to Stuart, that was not to be. By the time she finally hit the road for the drive south, she was resigned to the fact that she'd probably be late for the Sunday family dinner yet again. Elise and Stuart Jenkins had met through their work at the TOGRF, the Texas Organic Garden and Research Foundation. She'd been doing the preliminary work on her hybrid vines as she was developing for the family's vineyard, and they'd hit it off immediately. Stuart was attractive, stable, and brilliant. Everything she thought she wanted in a partner. They'd been dating for just over 6 months, and for the most part, it had been fine. But lately, Elise was starting to feel like something was missing, though for the life of her, she couldn't put a finger on what exactly was lacking. All she knew for certain was that the long-distance relationship was starting to wear thin, mostly because Stuart expected her to be the one to get on a plane to Dallas every free weekend. He, on the other hand, had only come down to Bastrop County a handful of occasions during the entire time they'd been dating. As if reading her thoughts, Stuart picked that moment to call her on her cell phone. She tapped the earpiece and answered with a, "You miss me already?" "Of course I miss you," he replied, chuckling over the line. "But I forgot to tell you that Charles and Teresa invited us to a dinner party they're hosting next Friday evening. Do you think you could come down a little early next week?" "Stuart, I haven't even got home yet." Charles and Teresa Davenport were close friends, but more importantly, Charles was Stuart's immediate boss. Naturally, Stuart would want to attend, but it annoyed Elise all the same. Now see, think about how much more convenient this would be if you lived in Dallas and didn't have to drive back to the boondocks of Delphine every Sunday afternoon. "Stuart, I'm just saying." "Well, don't." Elise took a deep breath and, after counting to 10, let it out really slow. "It's just shy of 4 o'clock, and I'll be lucky if I make the family dinner on time. Pointing out what a pain the drive can be is not helping at the moment." There was something else that was beginning to grate on her nerves. Stuart had started to nag her about moving to Dallas. Not that she was opposed to the idea of living in the city, but she loved working for the family vineyard, and Elise was nothing if not loyal. She was also finding that she was a hometown girl at heart. "Okay, we'll let that go for now," Stuart said. "Have you come to any decisions on the job?" Incredibly, Stuart had sprung a job offer practically as she was heading out the door a few hours previously, which was one of the reasons she was late heading for home. And not just any job. The TOGRF was expanding outside of Dallas. A benefactor had donated a large chunk of land for the organic research facility, and the organization intended to break ground within the next few months. And they were looking for the brightest horticulturists and botanists in their respective fields. Stuart had been chosen to head up the project, which was an amazing honor in itself, and he was now in the process of assembling a team. "Stuart, you said you would give me time to think about it. I don't consider a few hours adequate time for a decision of this magnitude, do you?" "I know, sweetheart, I'm sorry, but with your master's degree in horticulture and the hybrid work you've been doing for the vineyard, it makes you the perfect candidate to fill one of the positions. And then there's the added bonus of us being together here in Dallas. And you have to admit, the wage and benefit package that comes with the job is amazing." "Yes, and the work that will be done there is very exciting. The project will be on the cutting edge of organics. You don't have to remind me that this is a chance of a lifetime, Stuart, but I still need time to think about it. It would be a big change for me. And you're worried about your family? Well, of course I'm worried about them. Duh. What if she decided to take this job? How would she break the news to them? When her father had had his fatal heart attack 2 years back, he left the 1,200-acre vineyard in its entirety to her mother. Laura Beckett depended on her children to help her run the business. Her older brother Ross was the business manager for the vineyard and lived in the great house with his wife, in the guest house with his wife, Carolyn, and their 2 boys, Caleb and Ethan. Her sister Madison, who was 2 years younger than Elise, lived in the family residence and was in charge of all the bookings at Lodge Merlot, the property's special events facility. She also assisted at the Wine Barrel, the vineyard's retail outlet. Elise was the middle child. She'd inherited her father's passion for the land, and with her education in horticulture, she was at home in charge of the vineyard's growth and development. At 28, she chose to live in the nearby town of Delphine these days, but Riverbend would always remain her home. Would her family understand if she decided to take this incredible opportunity Stuart was offering? Look, I can't talk about this right now. I'm almost home. I'll call you in a day or two. She knew she was being short with Stuart, but it was also overwhelming. She wondered if her brain might explode. This discussion was something that would have to be put on the back burner for the moment because she'd be damned if she was going to be late for yet another family function. Her maternal grandmother was always writing her about her lack of punctuality and would have her hide. Abigail DeVries, Miss Abby to everyone in the county, might be 72 years old, but she was not to be messed with, especially when she was cooking. Elisa's smile spread as she glanced over the acres of grapevines as she was now passing, knowing the rows of various varieties ran right down to the banks of the Colorado River. Though her family had farmed the land for over a century, the vineyard was relatively new. It had been her father's idea nearly 3 decades ago and was a thriving business today. That she got to work for Riverbend as well had been the icing on the proverbial cake. Would she really be able to turn her back on this place, even with the tempting offer Stuart had thrown at her? Rounding the curve, Elise flipped on her blinker as the stone gates that marked the vineyard's entrance came into view. She'd been so engrossed in her thoughts that the single whoop of the police siren from behind her startled her. Looking into her rearview mirror, she was annoyed to see the sheriff's car turn through the gates after her. If he wanted to ticket her, he was going to have to do it up at the house because she wasn't about to be any later than she already was. She'd rather face the entire Bastrop County police force than her grandmother's ire again. As if reading her mind, the car followed her past the Wine Barrel, past Lodge Merlot, and right up to the sprawling ranch house of the family residence. Pulling the cruiser in next to Elisa's sports car, Deputy Jackson Landry climbed out of the vehicle and scowled at her over the hood. Like most of the folks in Delphine, she'd known Jackson all her life. At 4 years her senior, he was her brother's best friend. Growing up, the boys had been inseparable and mostly a nuisance to her and Madison. She had to admit, though, she harbored a crush on Jackson for a time, and he could still scramble her pulse with a look. It was a shame that their timing had been so poor. It seemed that whenever he was dating someone, she was free. Then the minute he was free, she was dating again. At the moment, they were both in relationships. Elise sat in her car and watched Jackson stalk toward her. She admired the way the light breeze ruffled his sun-streaked chestnut hair and how handsomely he filled out his uniform. Fate could be a cruel bitch, she thought with a sigh, letting her thoughts run. He used to butt the living daylights out of me. Oh, how things have changed. I'd like to have a taste of all that yumminess, maybe show him a few new uses for those handcuffs. Too bad he's dating Maylene McKinney. That woman has no imagination. And of course, there's Stuart. Miss Beckett, do you have any idea how fast you were going? He asked. Leaning down on the car door, he was close enough for her to see his own reflection in his mirrored sunglasses. Nope, but I'm sure you're going to tell me. He opened her car door and gave her a stern look. Too damn fast, as usual. Climbing out of the car, Elise held out her wrists and batted her eyelashes. You gonna arrest me, sir? Don't tempt me. Seriously, Elle, you drive like you're running at Daytona. You're gonna kill yourself and maybe someone else one of these days. She made a face at him. You know, Graham will ban you from the dinner table if you give me a ticket. After a brief stare-off, he broke first. His warm, rich laughter poured over her, and she smiled in return. I doubt that very much. Miss Abby loves me because I'm so pretty. She gave him a smirk, though he was probably right. She couldn't help taking him down a peg. Yeah, you just keep telling yourself that, pal. She leaned back into the car for her briefcase and purse, and when she straightened, she could have sworn he'd been checking her out. Of course, with those damn mirrored sunglasses, she couldn't be sure. Were you just checking me out? She asked. He took her arm as they started up the sidewalk toward the porch, and a wicked grin eased across his handsome face. Well, if you're going to put it out there, darling, yeah, I'm going to look, he drawled. Geez, Elle, get a grip. I'm a guy.